getting our panel to kick off, I want to introduce Ken Belva. Ken Belva has been a chapter leader here at OWASP New York City for quite some time, helping out in many different ways. So he wanted to put together a panel. So with that, Ken.
Hi, I'm Ken Belva. I've been in the OWASP community for quite a while, been in cybersecurity for even much longer than that. Let's see, I've had quite a number of roles over the years. But I guess the one thing that you should know, I guess, for this is that for the people that know me is that my phone is now in airplane mode, because last time I spoke here, people who know me and have my phone number started texting me like crazy, and as I was giving my presentation, my phone was blowing up, which I wasn't too happy about, because now I know who it is, because he's smiling, he's back there, you know. But anyway, so I had the opportunity to put together a bunch of questions for the panel today, and I was really happy to work with this great group of people. And so I'll pass the mic down for the intros, and I'll give a little bit of a brief overview about how we're going to proceed, and we'll go from there.
Ondrej Krehel, I'm a digital forensic lead at LIFARS. I performed various forensic investigations over the last 2 decades. Contracted with the government here in Europe. Primarily the work we focus on are corporate espionage cases with a classical ransomware intrusions, high-end red teaming exercises, and technical assessments.
I am Ramy Ramirez. Fell into the cybersecurity field by accident. I was an infantry guy in the Marine Corps that got medically disqualified and qualified for a program training veterans in computer forensics and counter-child exploitation investigations. Did that for about 2 years, got tired of it, moved on to data recovery, and now work incident response for a private firm in Washington, D.C.
Greg Richardson, CTO ambassador at McAfee as well. This is my 25th year in cybersecurity, so I am not in as long as the gentleman who said Ulysses S. Grant must have gotten spamware or something. But I've been doing cyber. He told me that, by the way. He knows. But I love cybersecurity. I've been doing it for a long while, way before it was profitable to do it. So I was into cybersecurity and doing Exchange servers and Novell networks on the side. Very fun stuff. But now it's definitely more, cute to be into cybersecurity. But I genuinely love it, so I'm glad to be here.
Hi, I'm Maria Filipakis. I'm a managing director at an insurance company called Global Atlantic here in New York, and I guess I'm the ex-regulator here for about 17, I know, not as cute. For about 17 years, I worked in government, most recently at the New York State Department of Financial Services, where I led the department's cybersecurity and virtual currency initiatives. I'm very happy to be here. Ken, my phone is in airplane mode. I didn't know that was required. And I'm happy to talk a little bit about my experiences at the department. And for all those who are not aware, there was a recent New York State Department cybersecurity reg that went into effect this past March.
Before I hand the mic back down, can someone if we have a live stream URL for this event, can someone write it somewhere? I want to tell my people, etc. Thank you. Meaning my family needs to know that I'm actually here today.
It's YouTube /hack_NYC.
All right, so let's begin here. So there are a number of topics that were posted on the meetup, so we're going to cover a bunch of those. The way I like to work it is I'll give a brief intro, basically from a public source, to make sure that we're all kind of on the same page in the context of what the conversation is about. We're coming from the same page. And then we'll just go down the line and have people comment on different questions that were brought up through our email discussions before we came here. And what I like to do is I like to go in one direction for one question and in the other direction for the other question. This way nobody keeps going first. And so take it away. Also, I should note that we'll approach things from both a top-down and bottom-up perspective. So CISO, top-down, pragmatic, bottom-up, as well as a regulatory perspective as well. So let's first kick it off with the IoT rush to market. IoT is hot, as probably everybody knows, right? Embedded devices have major security issues. And so given the proliferation of connected devices already, there's an estimated to be at least 6.4 billion, and there remains the critical question of how to ensure their security. The cybersecurity challenge posed by the Internet of Things is unique. The scale of connected devices magnifies the consequences of insecurity, basically. So let's start off with a top-down question about what are the security risks of the explosive growth of the IoT space, and what are some strategies for mitigating those risks?
So last year in December, probably many of you remember, especially if your kids could not play games on internet, there was a Mariah botnet that DDoS the 3 big companies, right? So all parents freaked out and said, our kids can't play the games. Imagine you have kids for a holiday weekend at home and the games are not working. So I think that really redefined what we think about the IoT. The magnitude, one of the providers that we work with was hit by traffic 1 terabit per second, right? That's pretty cool. If you can imagine, like that, ultimately you're dealing with a tsunami basically coming at you. The challenge with those devices was that they actually can't simulate full handshake, so they almost look like a normal user to basically from the outside. And unfortunately, I would say that embedded code doesn't go through the same level of scrutiny, so ultimately creates a really nice vehicle for the attackers. What I particularly like about it was that it creates anonymous basically connections, meaning that you can reinfect these devices, but self-replication. Kind of live in a post-node era where various exploits are disclosed, and literally you can go and swipe entire universe of the IoT. And that's maybe just one opener, that if you want to stay anonymous on internet and you want to do some significant damage, there is a new tools, there are new weapons basically for you, and these are IoTs.
I think the Mirai botnet incident was October 2016. What? Yeah, it was right. Yeah.
And it was quite big actually. DHS got escalated basically to DHS, so DHS was appointed to actually handle the incidents. It became that big because it's ultimately affected the critical infrastructure of United States by the providers. I mean, imagine, not gonna mention one of them in the room here, but the basically whole that cloud ecosystem went to nowhere.
Funny thing is, on the subject of rush to market, I think it was 3 years ago that this subject was brought up by OWASP, with IoT being the new toy in the spectrum. They provided a list of the top 10 most popular, and they still provide those out, top 10 most popular IoT devices. And based off of that list, HP conducted a study themselves and found that 70% of the devices that are out in the market are allowed to work on unsecured networks. 80% of them provide at least one piece of PII, whether it be through its cloud service, through the device's respective application, or through even the device themselves. And I think 70% of attacks on these devices in the study were able to accurately find user accounts. These are accurate accounts, first, last names of individuals. They don't have, for the most part, none of them have a requirement for passwords that have any form of complexity to it. And these are just simple things, all right? I mean, we could talk about the usual avenues we take to disrupt systems like that. But in the rush to market, having simple steps that we can take to provide standards in password requirements and what they're allowed to connect to would do that. And I think another thing that's been brought up in the last few years is maybe decentralizing them, maybe not requiring a server-to-client relationship to operate these devices. If my automatic washer finds out that it's low on detergent, does it need to communicate with a server to notify my phone to order more detergent, stuff like that? And that we can get into a little bit more when we get into blockchain, but that's a solution that's been brought up for that.
So I'll probably take a different approach to this, seeing as how my entire house is smart house. So I want my washer to tell my phone that it needs, I'm being dead serious. I want my sprinklers to go out and check if it's gonna rain tomorrow and not sprinkle automatically, because I ain't got the time to do that. I'm here in New York talking to you guys.
Why does it need a server-client relationship?
'Cause it can't-
Why doesn't it just tell the phone itself?
Because my phone is, what, 1,000 miles away, and the easier way to get that done is through a cloud service. I get what you're saying, I'm not disagreeing with you, but I think from my perspective, we need to figure out a way to do this more efficiently on those devices. And that is a technological hardware problem. The reason why, my opinion, of course, the reason why we're seeing weak passwords and unencrypted protocols being used, et cetera, is because the processing power of those devices is so little, number one, and number two, the devices are being rushed to market. No one's taking the time to say, hey, let's develop security. And I'll throw that back at the foot of OWASP and other organizations like that. Probably you guys need to do, excuse me, hate to say it, better job of putting pressure on manufacturers, et cetera, to code in a secure manner. It's still shameful to me that I don't want to say which device, but one of my smart home devices, I had to put it in a special firewalled section of my home network because it has a hard-coded password. And the password is stupid, like 123456 or something dumb like that. And if I can find that hard-coded password in all of a minute, I guarantee you someone else on the internet somewhere has that listed up on a site. And that's a problem to me. So, the very coding and the way we're building those devices, maybe we need to start reviewing that as well. Yeah, exactly. I call it stupid, but you're right.
All right, so I'm going to come at this from, I guess, a sort of regulatory perspective, right? A compliance regulatory perspective. I find this actually really, really interesting. So as a former regulator, one of the things that you often struggle with is how do you balance innovation, right, with making sure that you're safeguarding customer data as well as the institutions you regulate? Because you understand that there is a rush to market, right? People want to put all this software, out as soon as possible. People want smart homes. They want to be able to entertain their kids during holiday vacations and whatnot, right? And this also includes the financial institutions. I'm kind of coming at it as a former financial services regulator, but also these financial institutions themselves are often going to be kind of locked in, right, and have smart institutions. And how do you deal with that? And I think what the regulator perspective is going to be is, one, what are you doing to sort of safeguard, right, customer information, okay? That's going to be sort of primary of import, because the customers themselves, your retail consumers, they're not always necessarily going to go through the kind of analysis. They may not even know it's set to a default password, right? Or it's not necessarily encrypted, or that you can have some much more sort of sophisticated, kind of secure environment. It's sort of like the equivalent of sort of selling them a car and expecting the consumers to understand, right, how to sort of fix brake limitations. So some of it is sort of disclosure and getting more information out there and maybe doing a better job of it. From the financial service institutions, I think what you'll see is regulators asking a lot more questions around this, right? And that might be during an exam process. It might be sort of through regulations, by doing sort of more detailed risk assessments, where they're going to ask the kind of questions, I think, that you just heard, I think, some of the panel kind of get into in a little bit more detail.
So when we talk about cybersecurity these days, in a way, it's good for all of us. But we...
Yeah.
This is going to get weird if someone in the back row asks a question.
So when we talk about cybersecurity, in a way, it's good for all of us, But companies have compliance. There is no accountability for manufacturers, like you are saying, they are rushing their products to the market. They should be the first point. Their product should not work unless the default password is changed. So,
For example, yeah, agreed.
So, meaning, did no one, is there anything getting done? Like, we talk about users awareness. Okay, we have to train the users, but what about the point of initiation?
If I can answer that directly, I would say as a market, which I've been looking at for a long while, we have rolled back to more unsecure posture for the sake of ease of use. Because while in this room, probably 80–90% of the people are very comfortable changing a default password, probably 100%, maybe 99% of consumers have no idea what the word password means. I still struggle with customers that are having a tough time and getting users pissed because they have to change their password every 90 days. What, I can't reuse the same password? That's crazy. Oh my God, how am I gonna remember these passwords? I can imagine those users balking at, before I plug in my fridge, I gotta change the password, otherwise it's not gonna cool my ice cream. Holy cow. So while I agree with you, I understand why the manufacturers are doing it. So even if it's not as rudimentary as the default password needs to be changed, let's at least, or you know what? I'm of the opinion that we need to start thinking about, how about not using passwords at all? Passwords were cute when we were protecting, limited non-PII data 40, 50, 60 years ago. Now we are protecting literally my identity. I'm not comfortable with, a series of letters and numbers in a specific sequence is what's keeping my identity, safe. I'm not even comfortable, the lady next to me, I'm lousy with names, I'm much better with IP addresses, I'm sorry. The lady next to me, so I will call you 10.10.10.1, I'll be 2, you be 3, that's right. Marie.
I've never been called 10,000 before.
The lady next to me, Maria, you said?
Yeah.
Maria just spoke about the regulators. My fear of that is the regulating entities themselves are leaky as sieves. So, I'm not even sure if a regulatory body is the one who can police that. So it's not an easy solution. It's not something easy to answer.
All right, let's keep the mic down there and let's move on to the next lower level question. Well, I'll cut you off this way because you're very you're good like that, but I'll limit you. Don't worry, I promise. So one thing before I get to the kind of bottom up question about the IoT stuff. Up on the board there's the live stream as well as a bunch of Twitter handles for people that are participating today. So just keep that in mind. So the bottom up IoT question I have is, right, we heard from the panel, we heard that IoT is a great vehicle for anonymous kind of hacking. We heard about the OWASP guides to IoT devices, right? We heard about default passwords going online. So what are some of the lack of controls, basically, the kind of security from 1990s that we see in these IoT devices or lacking in them that we really should be aware of, especially if we're going to try and do some implementation of them, in particular on corporate networks as opposed to home networks?
So I would say it's imagine you come to an emergency room, because we often been compared to as emergency room operation or a military type of SWAT unit, and we have no procedures how to do any operation with you, right? So we work completely ad hoc, and that's what I think is happening in IoT. I mean, the coding itself, it's truly pure magic, right? Whatever the code is going to work and it's sellable, it's going to sell on the market. So I don't think that we as an industry put any frameworks or any thoughts around the really good secure coding and what that means, right? So OWASP and various other movements are, I would say, industry movements, but there is no regulation right now forcing you, basically, or law to do the secure coding. It's literally, it doesn't exist. Another component is the complete integration with everything. Like, we became an era of society where making a phone call is crucial, right? So everything has to talk to everything, and we have to exchange data with everything. And we don't really care if it's secure or not. We just want to do it, right? So if you have IoT at a home, it's just API, whatever API that is as good as it's talking. And that's important. And the last one I would say is that often when we interview young individuals and we ask them, what do you want to do in their life? Some of the younger generation just tell us, I'm just gonna eat the sandwiches and create another chatting application, sell for $1 billion. I said, well, that's exactly what you should be focusing in your life, right? So what we set up as a society is this precedence that no matter what a piece of junk you're gonna create, right? And one of the programs is called a professional vomit that's sellable, right? If you create that and you have people to buy that and put them on the phones and use it, that's all you need to do.
Does it have to go that far? What I mean is the examples that we've referenced. You mentioned the Mirai botnet itself. The exploit targeted devices with default passwords. That's really all it was. It crawled the internet looking for devices with default passwords and utilized them to create a botnet to conduct their attack. With doing that itself, would the requirements of stringent password requirements, do you think that would move us along? Does it have to go as far as you mentioned, or go beyond implementing passwords? Do you have any recommendations for what could mitigate that? What could replace that or supplement it?
It would require a little bit more processing power on those devices, but some form of a PKI type infrastructure, something. I mean, anything would be better than a password at this point, in my opinion. Because if it's a password and the users are forced to change it, they're probably not going to change it. So now we're back to square one. So just the passwords alone, I'm concerned about that. Why not just question? Maybe? Yeah, fine.
Part of the problem is not that there's too little processing power, but there's too much. The attack surface is too broad. We're putting operating systems on those devices, and we're exposing the entire operating system. There's too much power. There's clearly enough power. There's clearly enough power to implement a VPN using public key to secure the connection rather than trying to do it with passwords. These things have just not been well thought out. But understand that right now the most vulnerable things out there, the most vulnerable appliances, continue to be cameras. That's what Mirai went after and was very successful. And the cameras are 20 years old. So, the phenomenon is barely upon us.
Thanks, Warren. There's another question somewhere in the back. Question, comment?
So on the Mirai topic, the big thing with the cameras, this stuff has been out there forever. Okay, most of us pen testing, we always use cameras as our jump point. The biggest problem is it's that whole compartmentalization within the organization. Cameras belong to physical security, which reports to facilities, which reports to HR. There's no IT coverage on those teams whatsoever. And until somebody goes in and changes that, it's going to be there forever. Okay, I've walked in, I've tested buildings, camera systems. They haven't been updated in 10 years. Okay, and they're running open Linux, open ports all over the internet. So until that changes.
The other thing about cameras is that they're directly connected to the internet. One of the things we ought to be doing is distinguishing between those appliances which are intended to be connected directly to the internet and which have a very high security requirement, and those which are only intended to be connected to a local area network and which are going to be partially at least protected by a firewall.
All right. And after this, we'll move on to the next topic. If we're keeping on schedule, we only have one more topic that we can
I guess my problem I'm saying also is that when you're self-employed and you don't have something infrastructuring you and you're in your own thing, somebody has attached themselves to my network and you don't know, and with dangerous things like hidden apps and secret messages, and why I find home devices dangerous, if somebody connects themselves, you don't have the home devices, and people are able to manipulate your home through your smart TV and things like, you don't even know what happened until you actually have somebody backing up your data and looking in the morning, which, like I said, I thought it was a tech problem, and now I find out it's a security problem.
We call them internet friends, right? Some people search for them, and some people invite themselves, right, on its own. But we all have internet friends. That's a bigger topic and issue. This could be a separate panel about internet friends. Yeah, a whole separate discussion, I think.
All right, so since we only we had about 4 or 5 topics lined up, but since we really only have time for one more, given that we have to end at about 11:15, let me see a show of hands. First, let me read off the topics, then I'll go back over them. So we've got interoperability, double pulsar, nation-state hacking, and blockchain. So let me see a raise of hands for who wants interoperability. Okay, that's not too many. Double pulsar. Just a few more. Nation-state hacking. Ah, yes. Okay, great. Blockchain. Oh, yes. Actually, thank you. I like blockchain. I have some comments on that I'm going to make. All right, so give me 1 second to just swipe over here.
Hippie crowd.
All right, good. I'm glad you guys are smart. Pick the right topic. Okay. Is there anyone that wants me to read like the Wikipedia about what blockchain is, or can we skip that? Read it? Okay. So a blockchain is a distributed database that is used to maintain a continuously growing list of records called blocks. Each block contains a timestamp and a link to a previous block. A blockchain is typically managed by a peer-to-peer network collectively adhering to a protocol for validating new blocks. By design, blockchains are inherently resistant to modification of the data. Once recorded, the data in any given block cannot be altered retroactively without the alteration of all subsequent blocks and the collusion of the network. Functionally, a blockchain can serve as an open distributed ledger that can record transactions between two parties efficiently and in a verifiable and permanent way. The ledger itself can also be programmed to trigger transactions automatically. All right? So, boy, we've got a lot that we could ask. Let's see. All right, so let's start off with what are the benefits of blockchain and what are some of the risks of using it?
Go ahead.
Oh.
I was saying I'd almost want to hear the audience's take on it, since the audience was so, gung-ho about the topic. I'm very curious, like, what do you want to talk about with blockchain? To be very honest, that blockchain is a broad topic. We could go anywhere. You want to talk cryptocurrency?
What exactly do you want to know about blockchain?
Yeah. What's interesting about it? Did someone ask if it's secure?
I have a fundamental question, and it's okay to skip it. So there are businesses that are exploring blockchains, and some pretty big institutions and enterprises are investing in it, and they can afford to. So if you're talking to the enterprise risk management team or somebody who is talking to the C-suite, I think it would be useful to know the best questions to ask that are business aligned, so that you have a way to connect with the executive sponsors who drive the budget. Otherwise, there's the risk of like the same old situation of people know the risks and they don't always have a way to connect to what's going on. If that's relevant to the group, great. If not, it's okay to pass on it. But it's what are the key things that will help drive management's interest in this topic? You're in sales, aren't you? Pretty much.
I can tell you that the one interest, I would say what financial institutions are really exploring is the transactional aspect of the blockchain, right? So you have multiple transactions, you're exchanging with the parties, and it's all in a sequence where the modification is obvious. And I don't think that's really exists in the current wire system or ACH transactions or micropayments, right? So the usage is, I would say, it's kind of like a self-presented in it. And we try to mimic various financial transactions by PKI, digital signatures, and encryption. Get the tracking of the transactions and basically authenticate it, authorize, and then sign it was not as natural. So the blockchain could provide that mechanism for it, like for financial institutions, that we could secure more transactions. What you see like a classical wire fraud right now today, right? So some of these aspects could be addressed by the blockchain. So why we don't believe it's really happening? Because I haven't seen a really good commercial solution actually based on the blockchain and presented very well to executive and explaining that how it's going to work, right, for wires. If you look at the financial systems today, It's all based on older APIs, on older models. So what would be residual risk in that scenario, correct? When I started in a government around 20 years ago, I was told that encryption is going to solve everything, right? And then became a momentum of collisions in MD5, in SHA-1 functions. Then we saw the symmetric encryption breaking apart. Then we saw asymmetric encryption keys increasing. We saw the attacks based on computer collisions. Then we moved completely outside of the crypto functions, and we created what they call the computational functions, right? And if you look at the latest PGP, GNU PGP hack and how can be predicted, look at the WannaCry, how you can compute everything out of the memory of computers. So I would say the risk is always in there that even though you store the record securely and you sign it, you have to work with that record. And there is always chance that someone who has that record in the hands, right, the trusted individuals, and in that case, it's a trusted module, it's a memory of the computer. Like, how can you trust that that's not flipping bits and bytes from a starting position? If you look at some of the hacks, for example, NSA and Shadow Broker, I truly tell you, I mean, we've done various nation state, but if you look at the PlugX or Red Leaves done by certain government out of Asia, all those implants, and how they ran in the memory of the computers, they've been around since 2009, right? In 2017, they are still successful. All the implants in the memory of computers are still successful. You look at the Shadow Broker dump, still successful. So there is always a risk. Whatever is processing those transactions, you have to be sure that it's living in a trusted environment.
So it's a 2-for-1. The blockchains, as I understanding it, rely on peer-to-peer transactions. What would prevent a nation state to alter those transactions using all the, the computing powers? And I'm not pointing fingers because I'm Russian myself, so by the way, so full disclosure.
Sure, yeah, good point. Keep in mind that even if they did, and of course you could, those ledgers don't just sit in one node in that peer-to-peer network. Everybody does. If ourselves, this was a peer-to-peer network, want to make a transaction with, was it 10.10.1, right? Yeah, if I want to make a transaction with 10.1, all right, that transaction is annotated on my ledger, and it's on everybody's ledger as well. If you yourself, sir, wanted to manipulate that ledger on my end, it doesn't just sit on mine. There would be a conflict between my ledger and theirs. It would be invalid, and it would correct itself in a sense. See what I mean? Not just that. It's not just one thread of communication in and out to where you wouldn't be able to just tap into that communication between 10.3 and 10.1 in a sense. You got anything?
Yeah. So the key with blockchain, and this might help the gentleman who asked the first question on how do we speak to executives. One of the keys on blockchain is these security, and they're not really security centric, but these features are part of the protocol. The ability that we can be sure that that block is XYZ content, and if a nation state or a government organization that's not a nation state, because I think a lot of what we are attributing to nation states might very well not be nation state at all. I think Russia in particular is getting a very bad name in the media nowadays, and I don't think there's any way to prove that it's necessarily Russia doing it per se, but that's a whole other conversation. The ability for a group to take those blockchains and those blocks and modify them is prevented by the protocol itself. That's why executives are interested in the protocol, because it inherently has these features built into it. So how do you position that to executives? First thing you got to ask is, what are you planning to implement this for? It's so broad to say, hey, we're investigating blockchain. What are you investigating it for? For a security system? Are you investigating it for a financial transfer system? What are you looking at it for? It's almost like nuclear fission. We can use it to generate power in homes. We can use it to bomb Japan. It's the same technology. What are you planning to use it for? And it's probably similarly powerful. And the last thing I'll say is I agree with the other panel members where years ago, encryption was going to be the end all. A couple years after that, NAC was going to be the end all. That solves all of the security problems. There is no one tool that's going to solve all these security problems. So blockchain, eventually there will come workarounds to blockchain also.
In terms of risk, we're presumably all security professionals over here. What other kinds of risks? You talked about encryption and protocol. What other kind of risks should we worry about if our executives come to us and tell us what's the security implications of blockchain? Whether in the protocols, whether in the overall environment?
The biggest risk, in my opinion, is the risk of investing and the cost of not the investment of money, but the investment of human capital into developing out what you're about to do with this new piece of technology that's brand new. What if next year blockchain is not as hot and it's not the hot new sexy that it is right now, and someone finds a workaround or a flaw in it and suddenly doesn't work right anymore? That's the risk. Have you now invested hundreds of millions of dollars in building your whole money transfer system on this technology only to find out, it's kind of got a little flaw in it? That's the risk. So it's not a technology.
Okay, so I'm going to add my 2 cents because we have 3 minutes here. So finally, so in my opinion, I mean, I'm not going to go into the details of blockchain per specific organizations, but as I was looking at it, I think on the whole, as a society, we're going to be moving more and more towards it. I hate to make predictions as I'm on camera and, 5 years from now, right, you're going to be like, you said that when it was wrong. But I do think that blockchain really has the potential to be the next really dramatically changing our society. I think that the biggest threat by blockchain is actually going to be privacy more so than security. I think that once we tie our identities to blockchain, it's going to really alter the way we do things and see things. I just came up with some simple thought experiments about what happens if you tie your GPS locations into the blockchain, right, and do that over time. What could be told about you from having such concrete information tied to a specific identity over time? And one of the things that I came to see that I think is going to happen is that it's going to be like our old ideas of networks, and that is the network becomes more valuable the more nodes that are attached to it. And in the same way, blockchain will become more valuable with the more blocks that are associated with it per particular ID. I'm sorry, what? Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I mean, I guess I'm going to have to defer.
Okay.
I mean, unless you...
No, this is just the response because you were saying if the blockchain is hacked, okay? I think everything right now in computers is hacked. Okay, so it's not like, and blockchain itself is a new way of doing it. You can't, sort of go into it and find out, you change something, it's invalid. So somebody's been there. Okay, it changes everything. This is a new change. 20 years ago, we had the internet. All this information got united. Now we have the internet of value. This is the Bitcoin. This is the blockchain. And everything's on crypto. I don't have to trust you. I can trust the code. Blockchain itself, Bitcoin itself, there are a lot of things that are going to change over time, but you have to start using it. Okay, and corporations that are trying to maybe, I think a lot of them are afraid of it because they're trying to take it over themselves. That's not going to work. The most important thing about the blockchain is it's decentralized. It's all over the place.
So I wanted to add to that. The more nodes that get added, the more value. So what I think is going to happen, and since we have the expert, you can correct me if I'm wrong, there's going to be a propensity for more people to connect more data to the blockchain. And the more and that will ultimately accelerate, which is why I think it'll be adopted more rapidly by society and cause such a rapid shift. And then you'll have privacy issues around all the data that's linked up on a particular blockchain relative to a particular individual, because it is I think that this is going to be potentially one of the sources where you could have, the singular identity ID. We've been talking about. Oh, you've got someone else. I'm going to. Okay, last question. So that's my thoughts on the matter. You can see me after if you want more. So last question.
Well, just briefly, I'm from the state of Delaware, and we just passed, Senate and House passed legislation to accept blockchain for licensing, and they're going to move to also shares being traded in Delaware, represented using blockchain. The issue I have is who's going to be left carrying the bag if there's a liability? And Ethereum, about a year ago, it wasn't a hack, but the account is still trading about $60 million out of a pool of 200 million. It wasn't a hack, it was a bug in the contract code that was inside the block that is in Ethereum. And it was on line 666, by the way. There's a nice Bloomberg article that came out about a couple weeks ago that says they're still out there. The rest of them took their 140 million and ran, so they lost the 40 to 50 million dollars. So if a state does it, or the country does it, or a company does it, who ends up carrying the liability?
Well,
We're gonna leave you hanging with that.
all right. Well,
Do you want to add to that?
I'll just say one last thing. Once upon a time, I forgot the guy's name from CEO of Sun Microsystems said privacy is dead. Well, privacy, excuse my grammatically incorrect phrasing, is going to be a lot more deader after this. So,
Let's hear it for our panel and Ken Belva for moderating. Thank you so much. It was exciting. You can check in with them on the live stream later. You guys can meet them outside, or they're going to hang out in here for our next speaker, which are going to get you ready, Maria.
Great, thank you. So we're gonna take a 15-minute break. I did want to remind everybody in the room that if you do have feedback and comments, please use the whiteboards. We use it as sort of an agile way to keep the events moving forward. If you think we should go ahead and focus on other topics, please list them. If there's items that you want to go ahead and push out, like our Twitter feed, please do so. And certainly if you're interested in speaking with any of the speakers, come grab them. Thank you. We will reconvene at exactly 12:30. I'm sorry.